The Oklahoma Sooners, 6-2 in Big 12 play, 9-2 overall. A lot to be excited about. Spencer Rattler, after a little bit of a shaky start to the season, came on strong. This whole Oklahoma team, they got some important pieces back in the lineup. And, now we're starting to look at next season with another year with Rattler, young wide receivers, real talented. This is going to be one of the best offenses, not just in the Big 12, but in the entire country. Kennedy Brooks is back after opting out. Ramondre Stevenson is gone, but Eric Gray is in from Tennessee. Also wanted to note Seth McGowan, who played all right in a couple spots as Oklahoma was really pressed at that running back position. Speaking of Tennessee, we've got some position battles along the offensive line. Bedenbaugh always gets a lot of credit for leading some of the best offensive lines around. That group, like the rest of the offense, kind of took the whole season to get their footing. But hey, again, pandemic season, I'm willing to, say there's some reason for that. Wanye Morris is going to be in there joining that group. They got to replace Creed Humphrey at center. I think that's big. And defensively, while I don't think they have anything settled on the back end, does Oklahoma have one of the better defensive fronts in the conference? Because I think there might be an argument. And if so, you're looking at a team that's going to have one of the top 2 or 3 quarterbacks, the best passing offense, and potentially one of the best defensive fronts. Shocker, Oklahoma goes into the season likely as the favorite to win the Big 12.
Yeah, we're looking at our Big 12 champ.
Yeah. Okay, cool. What it feels like.
Next.
I mean, yeah, I just think that, like, going into the spring, the questions I have, like, you're right, Chip, that offensive line last year was good, but it wasn't as good as the Oklahoma offensive lines we'd seen the previous years, but it wasn't bad. I think receiver is the most interesting aspect to this team this spring, just to see who, if anybody's going to step forward, because obviously Oklahoma always has receivers, but there's no proven guy right now. So there's going to be some open spots. There's going to be competition. And as we've seen, I don't think they need elite receivers to win the Big 12. But if they want to get to the playoff and win a game this time, they're going to need somebody to step up and become that guy to make big plays. Because I do think Spencer Rattler is going to improve this year. He's improved as last season went on, and I think he's probably the best QB in the Big 12. He's one of the best QBs in the country. So I just look at this team's talent. I look at the way the defense improved last year. I don't think it's going to be an elite defense in 2021, but I think it could be good enough. And I think that front seven is pretty good, and it better be one of the best in the conference, considering how they out recruit everybody in the conference besides Texas. But it's the clear cut best team is in a vacuum where nothing goes wrong and everybody's at full strength. I just think there's a huge gap between Oklahoma and everybody else in this conference in 2021.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Jeff.
I was just going to say, well, like specifically, I think Marvin Mims at wide receiver is like, you got to go to him and you got to say he's there. I know that Bud, you've been a big Jaden Hazelwood champion of his. There are a lot of players that were freshmen and sophomores last year who played a big role in the passing game. And I think that when you think about everybody from that group coming back, and I think that even they've continued to recruit the wide receiver position well, it's isn't that the reason Charleston Rambo probably left? He looked around and he saw young dudes that were going to take his role, and he said, later.
That's my thought. Like I had Rambo leaving. Like, can we read something into this? Because if you look at this, who's a better passer, right? Derek King or Spencer Rattler? Like, whose offense is better for catching balls? All right. So you're leaving a place that is, you're going to catch a lot more balls and probably, be more productive to go to Miami. And maybe it's just big fish, small pond as far as Miami's receiving room, like we talked about a couple episodes ago. I think that there's a lot of talent here, guys, like a whole lot, right? So Theo Weiss can play. Marvin Mims has a lot of upside. Drake Stoops played decently for them, actually. But then, like we talked about, Trajan Bridges is a stud if he can, stay focused, stay healthy, stay on the field. Hazelwood was the guy who was legitimately in the conversation for the number one receiver in his recruiting class, and he has just not been able to stay healthy there. I haven't seen him, a whole lot recently, but assuming he hasn't lost a step from the injury stuff, he should still be really, really good. I'm buying this receiving core, for this year. I'm a little bit worried about replacing Creed Humphrey and Adrian Ely. Like, Ely was a very nice tackle for them. Humphrey was one of the best centers in the country. But I think this offense overall, because of the greater experience that it has, will be more buttoned up this year, and will have fewer sort of unforced errors. They were actually very uncharacteristically 110th in havoc rate allowed last year. And that's just not something that Oklahoma typically does. I think that it was very much youth related, whether receivers running the wrong routes or Rattler being young, or the offensive line kind of being in flux there. But they got it together at the end of the year. And the stuff that Kansas State was doing to them, other teams didn't do to them nearly as well, down the stretch last year. Defensively, I'm kind of bullish as well, right? Losing Ronnie Perkins sucks. Perkins is a real difference maker, but Nick Bonito, South Florida kid, pretty good pass rusher for them last year. They have Stripling still. They get Caleb Kelly back at linebacker, somebody who was out for the whole year last year. And then something I noticed on defense, like their explosive play rate was very high, and it was basically the only thing that wasn't good or very good about that defense. And I think the one spot where they're really not losing very much off last year's team is in that back seven. So if those guys can communicate better, have fewer busts, I mean that could really be a nice help here for the Sooners, who are my conference favorite for sure.
So what kind of odds can I get on Oklahoma or the field? And does anybody want to take the field?
Ooh. If you give me 3-1, I'll take the field.
All right, yeah.
On that one, I'm always.
All right.
Put it on the tab.
A field guy. Although I do think Oklahoma, I think this year Oklahoma wins their first playoff game. So I'm bullish on Oklahoma. I just always take the field because what happens if some, injuries happen, stuff goes down. I thought the defense, Alex Grinch, I think this defense is getting better and better. Spencer Rattler, if you look last year, he had 7 picks on the year. 5 of them came in the first 4 games. Remember halftime he got benched against Texas and it flipped the switch. It's can't throw it to the other team anymore. And he definitely dialed in, was more careful with the football. You guys mentioned some of the losses out. The offensive line, Rattler's mobile enough where it shouldn't be a big problem while they're working in some of these new spots along the offensive line. So I think this is the year that Oklahoma gets in position to win their first playoff game, play for a national championship. I don't know if I'm willing to go far and say, hey, this team's going to win it all, but I think this will be their best team that they've had yet.
That'll be fun.